Hi folks, welcome to Better Boston Arts, the interview series asking experts how the Boston art scene can rebuild after the coronavirus pandemic is over. I'm DigBoston executive editor Jason Pramas, and today I'm talking to Somerville-based artist Iaritza Menjivar. And since I just moved and don't have my customary streaming setup out of boxes yet, let's get right into it. So welcome, Iaritza.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Jason.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. So I'll just
What I'm not
talk a
seeing,
little
though,
bit.
before we get started, is I'm not seeing the two-shot on my end. And I have to ask myself why I'm not seeing that. I know this is exactly how we want to start this very professional video, right? I see the two of us. Well, you know, folks, frankly, we're here for Iaritza. So, I mean, if you don't see me, I'm sure you'll live. So, yeah, cool. So, Iaritza, who are you? What's up? Like, tell us about yourself.
Well, my name is Iaritza, and currently I am the event and public art coordinator for the Somerville Arts Council. And I grew up in Somerville, so it's been a pleasure to come back to Somerville and work here, especially in the arts. My background is in photography. I went to Lesley University, and after that, I did a lot of event jobs, which I currently still do. So I'm still working a lot on my photography. I do event photography, weddings. I do assignments for the Washington Post sometimes when they have assignments in here in Boston. But I also work a lot on my personal projects, and specifically my project First Generation, which is about my family who are immigrants from El Salvador and Guatemala. And just to expand a little bit about like my trajectory as an artist, I also teach workshops, I do lectures, and I give a lot of artist talks about the work to college students and high school students, which to me is like super important because especially in cities like Somerville and Boston and the outskirts of like Chelsea. I've done lectures there talking about the project. And the reason why I mention it so specifically is because that's mostly where there's a lot of Latino kids growing up, and I'm Latina. So it's really nice to be able to share the work that people can relate to, especially kids.
Yeah.
And because of the same project, I've also been awarded grants for the project itself to continue to develop it. I've been a part of an advanced mentorship study program at Anderson Ranch Arts Center that's based in Colorado.
Wow.
That was like a program that was 3 years, and I also received a scholarship for it, which was really helpful. And I've exhibited in numerous locations. Here in Boston, there's been several galleries like the Leica Gallery Boston. In Somerville, I've exhibited at the Nave Gallery. I've exhibited my work also at the Fence, and in Arts Westchester in New York, part of Photoville. Sorry, not the Fence, but like Photoville, not the Fence.
Right.
Sorry. And yeah, I've exhibited in numerous locations, smaller places as well, and it's really great to be able to share my work.
Well, tell me about the core of your work, like, you know, because I've been aware of you for some years since you were a student of mine 1 year at Lesley University, right before you graduated. But you know, I think your work has been on kind of one big trajectory from the beginning. So what is it? Like, tell us about it.
Yeah, so I started this project at Lesley University. Again, my background was in photography, so they taught us a lot about developing projects, and I was doing a lot at the time. I was, working multiple jobs. I had to pay my way through college, and also commuting and stuff. So the closest thing to me, I was living with my family at the time, so the closest thing to me was my family. And any assignment that I had, I would really do portraits, any light studio work I would do with my family or family friends. And my community, it's like Hispanics, so we're very close and devoted to each other's work. So through that, I also took documentary classes, which was really my passion, and a lot of documentary projects from Stella Johnson, who I think you also know, Jason.
I do. She's great.
Yeah, she was really wonderful and a huge core to my visuals and also the like the truth and like the importance of showing truth in images. And I also took your journalism class for that reason, to be able to learn how to write, because writing was a huge part of this project. Because making the images was one thing, learning the visuals and composition and light and color, but writing was also really important.
Mm,
And through writing was how I found the reason for these photos.
right.
So yeah, and really the project is about, first, I feel like there's like three phases to my project. So it started more as like a personal discovery, like self-identity, like who am I, living in the United States but have an immigrant family. So
And
being
were you
more,
born here or did you grow up, were you born in El Salvador or where?
no, I was born here.
Yeah, you
So
were. Okay.
I'm first generation
Yeah,
American and my family's first generation immigrant.
gotcha.
Yeah, so we grew up like in that weird thing where
Yeah.
we're considered Latinos, but when we go back to El Salvador, Guatemala to visit our family, they consider us Americans. So it's like it's that discovery, right? Like,
My family's
who
Greek.
are
It's the
we?
same thing. And,
Yeah.
my dad was born here. I guess both my parents were born here. Yeah, but his dad, yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's
No, but I'm glad like we're on the same page. It's hard
in Greece
to
we're America.
really,
I mean, we're Americans for sure. I mean, there's no,
for
especially
sure,
me.
for
But
sure.
my parents who grew up speaking Greek first, same deal. Doesn't matter. You know, they don't know the latest slang.
Yeah.
You know, they, I'm sure you've been down that
Exactly.
road. You know, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So like when I go visit my family in Guatemala or El Salvador, they'll be like, "Oh, ahí viene la gringa." Like they call me gringa, and I'm like, "Whoa."
Yikes.
In Boston, I'm considered the Latin person or like the brown person. So so the project was really about that, about just like I said, self identity and trying to understand my culture and to understand my family and then the second layer was speaking about them, right? Like their experiences as immigrants in the United States, where there's white privilege, where there's racism, where they had to grow up in like the really, how do I say this without swearing?
You can
Like the
swear.
really,
We're
the
Dig
bottom,
Boston. We swear. Yeah, it's fine.
like a really shitty situation, right?
Right.
Like discrimination, racism, and like showing those stories to the light instead of hiding them.
Yeah.
So, and then the third layer to the project is like the photos serve as like a window for people to talk about these topics, to see it in a family, but also hear their personal stories. And to create conversations specifically because of the political situation we have been in for the past years, and how crazy it's gotten lately. And yeah, so that's really like the three, I think, main points of the project.
Wow. Cool. And you
Mhm.
followed it for now 5 years or almost 5 years?
Yeah, yeah, I guess 7, 8 years around there.
Wow. So even
'Cause I
before,
started
yeah,
in school.
yeah,
Yeah, I started the photos in school and then found like a purpose. Like it all came together, right? Like there was a thread that was
right.
in the images. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean,
So,
now, the big thing in the art world is like being able to explain your work. So you've clearly
mhm.
been able to do that, since you're getting national attention, and I'm so proud. It's great. So, but pride aside, this is actually a good segue into sort of what I'm interviewing folks about in this series, right? Because um, uh, as you have a lot of difficulties an immigrant, a young immigrant, despite growing up here, um, in general terms, certainly that kind of problematic carries through into your work as an artist too, and in the art scene. And I'm asking people like, what problems did you see in the broad art scene in and around Boston, and in particular, sort of parts of that scene prior to the pandemic that you think really sucked, really needed to be fixed. And you said something about this in the text you wrote for us, but please, give us the full picture here, like how you see it.
Yeah. So to put it very like simply first, and then we can obviously dig into it. I think that a huge problem before, even like way before the pandemic, I think it's always been diversity in the arts. And you know, being in school, I was probably the only person of color in my class.
Oh, at
um,
least certainly in my class. It's like,
and in
yeah,
your class too.
you
So
know,
in the arts, but at the college as well. And I think that, you know, I think the arts is a privileged field. And I think that's always something that people have asked me is like, how did your family feel that you wanted to be a photographer? And like they always give me this weird look. And it's true, I don't know. Like I'm sure they
happy. I
would have
don't know.
wished
You know,
honestly, they were just happy that I was going to college because their dream was to have like for me to go to school because, no matter what you do, but
did they go
you
to
know,
school back home? Because a lot of Salvadorans I know went to college, before they came here. At least a
no,
little bit. No, no. Wow.
no, my father, he got like a high school degree,
Right.
and my mother, she came here when she was 15 on her
Wow.
own with nothing
Wow.
to no one. Like she was like really on her own.
That's
Um,
hard.
so so I come from, this is a good also part of the conversation is like I come from a family that has no educational background. It's different when your family goes to college in the cities in their own country because
Yeah.
that also
Yeah.
brings like a different, I don't know, class, I guess. Like here you're taught that if you don't go to school, you know.
Well, particularly in Boston. I mean, in Boston, like our high school degree is a college degree, like a regular college degree. Like you have to start getting advanced degrees before you're even paid attention to in many fields. Whereas in other cities, even in the US, that's not really the case. So that's its own problem. Plus, I mean, a lot of immigrants here do come for school. Even if they can't, they find themselves not able to get the right visa, not able to stay legally, but stay anyway, or whatever circumstance they fall into, or just racism or whatever it is, they end up like driving cabs, like working, like Amazon delivery, working in supermarkets, doing whatever kind of job they can get, and yet they're highly educated. I've met a bunch of people, with master's degrees, PhDs, who are doing just like regular jobs because that's what they can get, that's what they can do. So that's why I ask. I mean, I was
It's
curious.
survival. Yeah, yeah, it's survival. But
And
yeah,
we're
no, my family doesn't have that educational background. So really, for me, it was like that initial process was like, what the hell am I doing, right? Like it was expected for me to go to college, but I had no idea what I was going to do. So I think a huge problem starts there is like there is no experience. You're starting from zero, or maybe even like in the negatives, and then finding your way up, right? And
yeah,
so in the arts, I feel like it's similar. I mean, there's not, if there is no research, there's no like prominent Latino artists who are shown to you in school. I mean, most of the artists that I was taught in school are white, and it's great. We learn a lot from that. But how do we start, or how do we continue the conversation of diversifying the arts, not just in school, but in museums and galleries um, and publications? And so that's basically the I feel like a problem that has always been in the arts, and how do we fix that?
right, right. Well, did you have any thoughts on? Well, okay. Well, I mean, before we jump forward to like
Hmm.
fixing this stuff. I mean, were there any like specific situations that you were in that you can like recount in general terms that really bugged you around here?
Yeah, so let's see. I think personally, um, there have been situations where I feel like I've been put on the spot. For example, like answering questions for artists, like, "Oh, you're a person of color, you should know," or "You speak Spanish, like you should do this." Um, and it's nice to be seen, right? It's
Mm,
nice to answer the calls when they're like, "Oh, we need a female Latina photographer. We need a Latina person of color to be represented in this exhibition." And of course, I want the opportunity, so I'm gonna say yes. But am I being called upon because of my work? Because my work speaks for itself,
yeah.
or is it because I fit the stereotypes that they need? My name is very strange. And
Not
I
not where
am
you're from. I mean, where your family's from, I
not
should
where
say.
I'm
It's
from
not, but yeah,
exactly.
it's like
Yeah,
it's
but
very
not where I'm
actually
from. But
normal.
it looks nice in an exhibition list, right? Like, oh, this name is definitely
Yeah.
not white.
Oh yeah, she's
Or
Mayan. Yeah, it's like yeah,
exactly. And yes, I am. And
thought so.
then, and also I feel like my work speaks a lot about the immigrant population. So is my work being represented because they need to cover that certain topic, right? And I mean, I have a lot of other projects, but the only project really that's reserved attention has been my first generation project, which I want that to happen because I want that conversation to happen. But those are like times where I've felt not like I would say problematic. Yeah.
Yeah, and you
And I've
worry,
heard similar stories from other colleagues too.
sure, who I hope to interview now because you've given me a list, which is good. Because I'm trying to interview all kinds of people, and um, and I think a lot of interesting stuff is going to come out as I do that, right? Not because I desperately need to be the great white interlocutor, but because it's my project. I mean, I want to be
And
broad spirited about it, and that's kind of how we do things at DigBoston. And I mean, I think um, the tricky thing for people in the traditional, that is kind of white, well-off art scene, is like even when they're well-meaning, they run into these they essentially typecast people, like you're saying they do. They're like, okay, yeah, we have this slot, so we need to fill this slot, and so then you must be worried about being typecast. You've said that, or about being like getting. This is like your first big career project, right? Your first generation project, right? But I don't think you want to do this forever, right? You want to do whatever you want to do, right?
exactly, yeah. Well, and also I feel like going back to what you were saying about like the art scene in general, and like if you remember, like I said in the writing too, like going back to receptions and galleries, even if you are like the person of color exhibiting in a place, they're always going to reach out to people. Like the exhibitions list always shows people or organizations or um, galleries that have money, right? Because you want to invite people to exhibitions who are going to be able to buy stuff, or that's the kind of audience that the art scene is targeted to.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess another issue that I also see in this is that um, you know I feel like a lot of galleries and places like they complain about not being able to find artists of color or enough artists of color to reach out to. And I think that's a lack of interest to reach out or to do your research.
That's a garbage
Um,
argument in certainly the estimation of my publication. It's like we open our doors to everybody. We make it very clear we want all kinds of talent. We go looking for that talent. The talent from various backgrounds and various communities, then surprise, surprise, knows and finds other talent. It's a networking thing, and you let people bring in everybody they know, and eventually you have this kind of nice broad organization, right? And so
mhm.
if we can do it, a newspaper led by three white guys, I don't see why museums can't do it with all their money and stuff. Like it's just I've heard this myself, you know, like, oh, where's the talent of color? And I'm like, littering the streets. Do you really have to ask that question? Or maybe it's that like the way you think about art, which I don't like in the art scene. Like I view art as a form of human communication, so everybody does it. But it may not be like in the genres and the categories that the traditional art world expects. Like it may not be like painting in a certain way or photography or dance or whatever. Maybe it's fashion. Maybe it's parties. Maybe it's something else. But like you
Maybe
have
it's
to,
food.
yeah. So like, being open to that and letting all different kinds of people into these rarefied spaces, these galleries, the white wall galleries and the
Yeah.
museums and stuff. That I think will help change things up organically over time, to the degree that these institutions are open and chill out. Like they're so uptight about even trying to deal with Black Lives Matter or whatever. We have a reporter Heather Kaplow, who's asking different institutions, so what are you doing about Black Lives Matter? And it's amazing when I read their interviews and they're like tripping over themselves, and I'm like, is this so complicated? Like, so I'll shut up now. Sorry, but yeah.
No, this is great, and it's true. It's like, why stumble upon those questions? Like, you should just be able to be transparent about it. Like, what is it that you're doing to call these audiences to reach out to under-resourced like places? Like, I feel like another thing too that I've noticed, unfortunately, is like in Somerville, there's a lot of gentrification that's happening, and we're taking over these houses and spaces and kicking out the families who grew up here. For example, my family. Like, my family was here, and then obviously it got way too expensive, left. And we're turning these places into these funky new restaurants and funky cafes, and so we're pushing people away, is what I'm trying to say. Instead of like going to schools and bringing the arts and showing kids that they are also capable of doing these kind of projects. And I think another problem too is in like hiring roles. Like, are there people of color who are in power? Are there people of color that younger kids can look up to? Are there people of color who are like trying to represent their own people and trying to hire their own people as well? So I think it starts by, I guess my 2 points here that got put together is like, it's the problem, like a way to resolve this problem. I know we're not really getting into that question right now.
No, we can get into whatever. I'm not restricting you. Like, go ahead, just say what you want to say.
Well, a way to resolve the problem is to bring the arts to younger kids who are from under-resourced cities or under-resourced places. Bring that possibility to them, and also put people of color in hiring positions. I think one of the issues that pushes people away from making those choices is a lot of people of color don't have that experience. I didn't have that experience. I know that at my role at the Griffin Museum of Photography, I worked there as associate director for several years.
At the Griffin. I coughed over you, sorry. Okay.
No, you're fine. I worked there several years, and the executive director gave me the opportunity to be able to be on that role. Like, she saw potential in me, and even though there were many times that I stumbled upon myself, she was there to help me through the process. And I'm very grateful to her for that, because I wasn't a person with 10 and 15 years of experience being like associate director, but she was able to be patient with me and to walk me through that experience. And I think we need more people like that.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of thing, develops over decades, right? I mean, like, for example, politically, I lived in Lawrence briefly, in the 90s, and the first Latino city councilor was elected in, I think, 94. And that was a big deal. And the population was already, like, hugely Latino. It had gone from being Irish and Italian and other white ethnics to being Latino, like, really fast, in the 80s and 90s. And now, I think there is a lot more leadership, Latino leadership, in that city. It is like a delay. It like takes a generation, and then you start to see. One answer is this is always the way with power structures, right? They don't change as fast as the community around them changes, but also racism. In this case, it's just very clear, right? When my family was coming here, the Greeks were coming here in the early 1900s. There were cartoons of us drawn as rats. Like we were portrayed as rats infesting white America. Okay, so like and now we are white, right? This process of not only becoming part of the power structure to one degree or another. We're not a huge ethnicity, like even Salvadorans, there's probably way more Salvadorans in the U.S. than there are Greeks at this point, right? But, or at least parity. I mean, there might be, I don't know the numbers, like 3 million Greek-descended people who are now all intermarried and everything. It's gotten very complicated, and there might be, I don't know what the numbers of Salvadorans are, but it's probably something similar. In any case, it took some decades, but there was a change, and we don't have the degree of presence like Irish and Italians, again, for example, which are there's much larger groups of people here. But we're there, right? And we're not considered aliens to be despised, except by the hardest core racists, who still consider us what they call mud people. So while they want to exterminate African Americans and like Jews, mud people, I think they're going to put us on. I think David Duke was going to put us on Long Island or something like that. So the Greeks and Italians, the Southern Europeans, we were going to get to go to Long Island. That's so nice of them. But I mean, so there's progress, whatever. But it does take a long time. And then to carry that progress over into the arts, which always is hard. It's always difficult unless you are very wealthy to be an artist. Like
That's true. Like so there's like a double jeopardy there.
Yeah, and it takes even long. Like it's one thing to educate people so that like kids, particularly like you, right? Which I think you got some of in Somerville schools. I hope it seems like you did because here you are, right? But a lot of kids, immigrant kids, don't get much exposure in their schools. I mean, there's problems right off the bat because many school systems don't even try to teach kids in their own language at all. Like my parents were just thrown to the wolves. They were just like, "Oh, you speak another language? Tough shit. Now you speak English, or you don't learn." That's how they learned English. Like basically, they were forced to, right? So like in some school systems, it's still like that. And so in that situation, it's even harder to take a kid, from a background like yours and be like, hey, here's the arts, woohoo, and people are like, well, how could you possibly make a living doing this cultural stuff? Like, sure, your uncle like is a musician and, your nephew, does interesting drawings or something, but that's not what they do for a living, right? Like, why would you even do that?
Mm-hmm. You're told you can't.
Yeah. I mean, my parents were considered weird because my dad's, this shouldn't be about me, but I'll just say this stuff anyway. My dad's family were leather factory workers in Peabody, and my mom's family were cafeteria workers and eventually co-owners of a couple cafeterias in Boston, and they lived in Dorchester, right? And they were weird because they were interested in going to museums. They were both singers. They met in the Greek cathedral choir in Boston. And they would go to, they would do stuff like go to museums and go to plays. And they would act in community theater, and they would take me and my brother along. So that's how we were aware that this was a thing that one could do. But the rest of my extended family, only now do I see cousins' kids doing more of what my brother and I did, like dancing. Well, we didn't dance, but like other artistic stuff, right? So it took a long time, So yeah. I mean, I relate,
Yeah, of course. And I think it's important to share, like, to also distinguish, like, I'm speaking about my experience as a first generation American from first generation immigrant parents of Latino parents, and yourself as a Greek. This is your point of view as a Greek, your story as a Greek, and not even to mention what the Black experience must be like, right? And
exactly.
I think that's a whole other level. Yeah.
First interview I did in this series was my friend and colleague, Shea Justice, and we get into that, and I'll get into that with other African American artists, certainly as we go through this. But I mean, yeah, it's like, and look, now my extended family, there's tons of racists, like, and it's really arbitrary too. Like, they decide certain ethnicities are good. Like, I have one uncle that likes Vietnamese people. He thinks they're very industrious, but he doesn't like Black people. And I'm like, why don't you think Black people are as industrious as Vietnamese? Like, I don't understand. Like, what would the difference be? Like and I mean, I can do a whole sociological thing. I can bring in friends and experts and we can hash it out. But at the end of the day, it's structural racism is a pernicious force, and it inculcates every aspect of American life. And once different ethnicities and racial groups get up to a certain point on the ladder, it's very easy to pull up the ladder. Even like I've even run into, and maybe you have too, Latinos that have been here longer than other Latinos, right? And then like totally, or, there's white Latinos, there's black Latinos, there's different shades of Latinos. It's not exactly like a racial group, right? So,
Exactly. And
like,
that's even like another conversation, right? Is like when you are a person of color, but you're white passing, and what difference that makes.
yeah.
And I have a friend who is Puerto Rican, and
Yeah.
she's very light skinned.
Yeah.
You know her, very light skinned, and she's like every time she's like they read my name and they're like and they say, okay, perfect. We have our token Latina.
Yeah.
And then when they meet me and they see that I'm not brown, that I am very white looking, white passing, she's like, they act extremely disappointed. And I'm like, they're like, oh, wait, you are this person? And she gets that a lot.
Yeah.
So like going back to her, like we were talking about earlier, is just based off your name. You fit that stereotype that people are looking for, and I think it's time to look past that and to genuinely look for people because we want to show their work, because we want to collaborate with them, because we want to be inclusive, not just to fit the statistic and check that off the list. So
that requires like paying attention to people though, and like really engaging and, well, as I struggle to do, shutting up and letting people talk and starting to see them. Like people don't see other people that they're not used to seeing, I feel,
Yeah. And I think the first steps is to just realize that there is a problem, to address that, and to know, like, yes, there is a problem. We need to find a solution for it, and addressing it and acting upon it, not just leaving it there. Is providing opportunities to these artists in not just by showing their work, but also hiring these people and collaborating in many ways. There's so many ways that you can integrate the arts into under-resourced communities.
So let's get into this now, because this is kind of the core question. I keep saying core.
Yeah.
This is the central question of this series. Is like, yeah, okay, things have been bad. They've improved in some places, in some parts by degrees, and other parts, other places not. Other parts of the art scene. I mean, what do you think can be done to improve your experience in the Boston area art scene or scenes? What ideas do you have?
Yeah, so I think that a huge problem, like we talked about, is economic problems, right? Is providing stipends, providing grants, specifically for these communities, and I think money is a huge issue.
Yes, I've heard that it is. Like,
providing scholarships for students to be able to go into these programs or into the university, which I didn't get any scholarships for college, but to be able to continue my education in the arts, I was given the opportunity for scholarships. And the fact that I was able to do that, the fact that I was able to receive a scholarship was the only reason why I was able to take this class. Otherwise, there was no way I could have taken it. I mean,
right.
That was very expensive. So I think that's a huge thing, is providing that for artists, for Black and brown artists. And also, I think, like I mentioned previously, is starting young, going into schools and doing activities with students. I think museums and galleries can learn a lot by providing these programs for students to be able to participate in, specifically students of color. I think that's another way that we should be able to address this, obviously after the pandemic.
Well, this is what we're talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
there's certain things. I mean, well, you're in a certain place now. You're working for the Somerville Arts Council. That's great. So that gives you, you've already, like you asked me with DigBoston, to spread the word about, grants and stuff. And I did, and I'll continue to do that,
Thank
And
you.
through our nonprofit, we have a Somerville news project anyway that we're going to be launching shortly called Somerville Wire. And that will be built for putting stuff out in Somerville. So we'll help. But yeah,
Yeah,
you're already doing that. That's good,
yeah.
you
And
know.
then also, I think it is a great point too. Is like I understand that there are nonprofits, that there are arts organizations who struggle just by being an arts organization, and I think that these places should be able to apply for this kind of help. For example, what the Arts Council is doing or was doing. Providing scholarships to people who want to work on these kind of projects, to provide um, this kind of activity for the Black and Brown community. Um, so I think that that would be another way to address these problems.
I mean, let's go back to the kids first, because this is something that really bugs me. I've written about it to some extent. I certainly talk about it with folks behind the scenes. I get very pissed off when I see a fair amount of effort being put into giving kids of color, African American, Latino, Asian, Native American, whatever it is, right? Like special programs, training, support in different fields, in different areas of endeavor until they're like 18. Then they become them. Then there's no more programs, right? Like, it's like, unless they happen to get into college, which has become more and more and more expensive, even in the public universities. Like, I went to UMass Boston first, stuff like it's ridiculously expensive. I happened to go to UMass Boston briefly in '87 when it was like $1,000 a semester, and then I went again, not quite 20 years later, starting in 2005. And it was already, the sticker price was already up over like 15,000, 16,000 a year for a public school. It's crazy. So like accepting the possibility of getting into school like you did and managing to struggle through it, which again is harder and harder, people are just like left to their own devices. So they're all pumped up. Let's say there's an arts program in Somerville already, which I know there is, like for kids, in the schools and outside the schools too. And they really get into it. And then they're 18 and they're not able to go to college, or at least not right away, and they are Black or Latino, then they're just dropped and their expectations have been raised, but there's no one reaching out to them. So I assume you see this problem, right? So
Yeah, I mean,
where would
I
there be
think
funding for the next step,
yeah. That's a good point too. I mean, and I think that's another way that this issue could be addressed is helping people when they're out of school. Like, what do you do now? I think paid internships would be huge. I think hiring or having there's like vocational programs for any other fields except the arts.
Right.
So why not the
Right.
arts? And again, it goes back, the argument that the arts doesn't have any money, but there's money because there's museums, there's money
Yeah.
because there's still galleries running. So I think that's a really good point. And I
Is it a
think
cost benefit thing? I mean, is it that people ask in government and in business and elsewhere, like, what does art give to the community that it needs that benefits us all? I mean, do you have an answer for that for yourself? Like when you have to tell people you're working for the Somerville Arts Council, you're an artist, why would we want to fund the arts? What good does it do? Can you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, through the arts, I was able to find a career. I
Sure.
was able to not just because of the arts, but what you learn through the experience. How to be in a work environment. Through photography, I was able to learn what it was like to uh, run events, what it was like to deal with people, just like these basic knowledge things that you learn from a job, I
But I'm
think.
asking what it does for the community. Like
Oh, for
how,
the community.
yeah, well, I mean, it's what the individual is important. The individual levels are very important. I don't want to dismiss that. We've discussed it some.
The
But I'm asking,
individuals build community.
sure, like, yeah, that's true. But I mean, no, this is something I always ask myself. Like, well, what, like I got really angry at the arts, like after when I led the union drive among the Leslie core faculty with other folks. I lost my job, and like I was, as part of that, the art school where I got my MFA at Leslie backstabbed me. They like left me like high and dry without any lifeline when the main part of Leslie University was throwing me out, basically. So like I got mad at the arts. I was like, man, if this is the way people act in the arts, maybe I'm in the wrong place. Like I thought we were all one big happy family, especially within one school. So I would ask myself, well, what are the arts? What does it do? That's kind of what I'm asking you, right? Like, what benefit is it to a community to have people reflecting on the experiences of people's daily lives in a given community, like you essentially do by looking at your own family and your own experience? Like, how does that benefit other people like you around here?
Right. Well, I think first I want to say that I think we've all been in a situation, artists in a similar situation of feeling backstabbed. I think that the arts builds a community, but unfortunately some situations like what happened to you, and I'm sorry.
I knew it was coming, as you know, but yeah.
Yeah, but well, in my case, I can only speak from personal experience and from what I've seen through others. Is for me, it's created a space where I've felt, again, I'm talking individual, but my project has also been beneficial to a community. I mean, just being able to share the story of this immigrant family, I've received messages from teachers and professors when they have shared these projects, not just my projects, but projects that are similar with their classrooms, and they've felt a connection and they've felt like it's motivated them. I've personally received emails, DMs on like social media of people thanking me for showing that kind of vulnerability out to the public, because they can also relate, and they can also feel like they can also do this for themselves. Like not just in the arts, but people who are going to school to be architects or to be scientists. Like they've reached out and said, like, I feel like I'm in your shoes, and I know that you were able to do it. I can too. So in a way, I think the arts reinforces people's beliefs, or it also opens your eyes to a different world. It opens your eyes to what other people's experiences are. And I think that in a way, we need that in order to build community and in order to build resilience.
Well, that was a good answer. I mean, that was my next question. Like, how does it benefit people outside your own group of people, right? Like the people you came up with, your own immigrant community, and you answered the question. Like, because it gives people a window into that experience, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It just shows it's an experience that anybody can relate to. I 2-3 weeks ago, I did a lecture for a class at BC, and it was through Zoom. But I received an email the day after saying, like, I'm white. She's like, I can't relate to your experience as an immigrant, but I can relate to your experience as a student. And thank you for sharing your story. Like, even just like again, going back to the small things that you learn, there's always like a relatable situation in the arts. It can be my project, it could be anybody's project.
Do you think, now we've been talking about representational art essentially. Both of us are photographers, so, and you don't have to do representational photography, obviously. And you do evocative, different kinds of interesting work that I see on Instagram and stuff too. I'm not trying to pigeonhole you, but your main project is, all of us, I think a lot of photographers like to take like corners of rooms and stuff like that because it looks cool.
Yeah.
Different lighting, different colors, it's all fun. Exactly. The first word I said was in Greek, and it was phos, which is light in Greek, incidentally.
Yeah.
But like, But do you think this applies also to non-representational art forms? I mean, what do you think about that? It's kind of a technical question, but like, so someone's doing very abstract stuff, like whatever it is, or someone's doing, I don't know, what do they call it? Theater of the absurd. Like different stuff that doesn't just have a clear meaning, right? But maybe has emotional content. I don't know. Do you think all arts is valuable and should be valued by society? Okay.
Yeah.
And
I mean, at the Arts Council, I don't do a lot of visual, I don't deal with a lot of visual artists. I deal a lot with performers and theater puppetry.
mhm.
We deal with, music, public art, which honestly is incredible the kind of feedback you get for public art. Like
Yeah.
earlier this year, we were working on a tree project, and it was a tree that was diseased, and this artist, Fermin Castro, from a Cuban artist, he transformed this tree into a mother holding a child up in the air. And, this woman stopped by one day when we were just doing like a photo op with the artist, and she was like, she's like, I grew up in this park, and I bring my kids here so that they can also be here, and I can't thank you enough for building this here, because for her it just brought peace. And I don't know. I think that
Mm.
art connects to a deeper level to anyone, if you are an art enthusiast or not. I think people can connect to any form of art in a very personal level, and I think that that's
Yeah.
important. It keeps you and your emotions, and I think that we need that in this world, especially with all the cruelty going around
So
politically.
so we should fund it. This is something society should fund. To wrap up, basically, like
Yes. Have I
that's kind of
convinced
your.
you?
I didn't need convincing. As for you out in audience land, perhaps you still do. I would just mention that this country has had, not just at the city level, like Somerville has, I think, a nice arts council with some money, and it spreads it around and hires people like Iaritza now, yay. And so now she's gonna probably spread it around, help spread it around better. That's good, But at the state and federal level, at the federal level, we did have the Works Progress Administration during the Great Depression, as if we're not in a Great Depression now, but when we had a government that was quasi sane and thought it was important to have a jobs program for people, artists were included for at least a few years. People were paid to be artists, to be visual artists and performance artists and writers and
Well, it also
filmmakers.
it also creates entertainment for the community, right?
Yeah, it
I
can.
mean, there wouldn't be any movies, or there wouldn't be albums and music if there wasn't any artists. So
Yeah,
even that superficial idea of art, I think, is necessary. So
yeah. And just
yes,
to
we should
reflect
fund
on
the
life.
arts.
To what? I'm sorry.
Exactly. I said yes, we should fund the arts,
Okay, so
and
that's
yes,
that's what we need
we
to be
should fund.
doing after the pandemic is over. Even now during the pandemic, as best we can, and then we have to spread the money around more equitably. Yes, so it's not just the famous great white artists, to use that expression kind of again. Like to wealthy people that can do it because they already have money, and then they get more money. This is certainly something I see in nonprofit funding in general. People with money get more money. So in journalism, and as I said, we have a journalism nonprofit, Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism, and we see ProPublica, which already has millions and millions and millions of dollars, getting millions and millions of more dollars as we're trying to do city-based work. You know, it's not.
Hmm.
It's a lot of the money already goes to the top, and I think the arts is exactly the same. You know,
Exactly.
but there's more
Yeah,
money
'cause
out there, strangely,
there is,
for
there
the
is,
arts.
yeah.
So
Hmm.
okay, that's cool. Well, I guess that's it. Do you have anything you want to add? Do you have any websites you want to point people to, or like anything else? Anyone you want to shout out? Like. Um,
Well, shout out to Jason Prima.
oh, thank you, thank you.
Um, no, yeah, I mean, I'm always doing stuff. So, there's my Instagram, Iaritza Menjivar. Follow me there. I'm happy to to talk to anyone. But also, I think one thing I wanted to say is like at the Arts Council, we are hiring for online programming. So hit me up. We're trying to help out artists as much as we can. So any virtual programming, because we can't do anything in person.
Right.
I'm your person if you're in Somerville. So yeah.
Cool. And
Thank you, Jason.
how would people hit you up?
Oh, right. Yeah. So my email is imenjivar@somervillema.gov.
All right.
Or you can just message me through the website, somervilleartscouncil.com.
Great.
.org.
.org. Okay.
Yeah.
Somervilleartscouncil.org.
Yeah.
Great.
Sorry.
Okay.
somervilleartscouncil.org. Yeah.
All right. Well, Iaritza Menjivar, it's been great talking to you, and nice to catch up a little bit online. I will end the video now, but if you just hang for a second, I'll talk to you afterwards for a minute. And
Sounds good.
thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.